I'd love to see someone try and beat a horse jockey on an elephant.
I'll add that to the calendar.
This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide SSDs, 40 gigabit per second network connections, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your server on. It deploys Linux in seconds from the Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distro and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and they have a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line, so definitely go check them out. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, cloning, scaling, and everything else that you want. So definitely get the most out of your Linux node and check them out at linode.com. And check them out at devchat.tv/linode. Hey everybody, and welcome to another Adventures in Angular show. This week on our panel we have Joe Eames.
Hey everybody.
Lucas Rubelkey.
Holler!
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. One quick thing before I introduce our guest. He's actually one of the speakers for Angular Dev Summit, which, as this is released, is going on right now. So if you go to angulardevsummit.com, you can still get a free ticket. The all-access passes are also available. This should come out on Tuesday. The price goes up on Wednesday. So if you want the all-access pass with the chat and everything else, videos, then you definitely want to sign up for that right away. And our guest today is Gleb Bahmutov. I hope I got somewhere in the neighborhood there. Do you want to give us a brief introduction? I don't think you've been on the show for a while.
Yeah, sure, Chuck, and thanks for inviting me. I'm Gleb Bahmutov. I've been, involved with Angular, a web application framework, a long time ago when Angular just turned 1, and I loved it. And I've been doing different things. I'm not working in the front end anymore, so I've been doing a lot more Node.js work. I recently joined a small startup called Cypress, and that's the subject of this podcast.
Yeah, in particular, I kind of want to get into end-to-end testing, and then you can kind of talk about how Cypress solves these particular issues. Because I'll tell you, having been a web developer for over 10 years now, I have never found an end-to-end testing situation that I absolutely loved. And I would love to just dig into what some of those issues are. I know that just from our pre-call that Lucas has expressed similar opinions about a lot of technologies. So I mean, I think the big challenge for me has always just been they take a long time for one, and the other issue is that I have to stand up all this stuff and do all this work to make it work, and then I go use something like Selenium WebDriver, and I wind up writing an app to test my app.
Right.
Do those issues sound familiar at all?
They're familiar to everyone, I think, right? Imagine you have to even install Selenium, right? It's so many dependencies that you have to get just right. And then the second anything changes in your environment, it kind of crashes, right? And it stops working. It's this rickety system where you have to set up and pray that nothing affects it in any way for it to continue working.
Yeah. Lucas, you were complaining before the show. What issues have you had with end-to-end testing? Because it sounds like you've had some nightmare situations too.
Well, I think testing is like flossing in the sense that, I think in theory everybody agrees it's something you should do, but I've never met anybody that said no, you totally should not test your app. Everybody's like, yeah, I think you should do this. But I think it takes a very disciplined person to kind of work through or get enough momentum to kind of achieve that escape velocity to make it kind of an everyday thing and something that's part of their tool chain. So just consistently, when you ask developers, are you testing? It's kind of these awkward, and I think people want to test, but, it's just, there's a lot of things you have to do. There's a lot of secret handshakes and, dial turning to get it right. And so with unit test, it's a little easier because you can focus on a single piece of code. And, I think that there's been a fantastic job done with Protractor, but it's built on top of WebDriver, which is, really kind of like an elephant, if you will, that we're trying to put a horse jockey on top of. And it's just a really kind of hard, cumbersome to get working. reliably, a lot of false positives, different things. And so it's just one of these things where like everybody should do it, but just the barrier to entry tends to be so high. I think a lot of people do not. So it's not even does it go totally wrong. It's just it's really hard to even just get started.
Can I point out something like right away that yes, we should be testing, but as a developer, you're not getting paid to actually write tests, right? The client never says, okay, I'll give you, $100K for you to write more tests for this project, right? It's completely unpaid activity. It's actually something you spend your time on, but cuts into your profits and your sanity usually to actually write tests. And what happens as well is if you're actually trying to write new features for which you do get paid, the tests get in a way, right? They are tremendous drag because if you refactor a feature, if you change how it works, all of a sudden you have to, if you have tests, rewrite the tests as well. So at some point you look at that, it's like, I should actually drop all the tests because I'm not sure if a feature is actually doing what the client is expecting to do. So I'm not going to write any tests because, well, I'm not sure if the test will actually be useful. So the tests get in your way. You're not paid to actually write tests. And all the extra effort that goes into setting up a test tool, writing the tests, and then, actually using them is pretty much wasted, I would say.
Now,
or could be wasted.
I've worked for companies where it was mandated that we write tests, but it was usually pretty complete unit tests and then end-to-end tests if they didn't take too terribly long.
Right.
And the other
I think that companies should pay by the unit test. That should be the only way people get paid from now on.
There you go. You have 135% test coverage.
Per test.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't want to poo-poo on tests, though. Like there is, a lot of studies that shows, well, I think that the fallacy is that, we're not going to write tests. It takes too much effort. But over the course of the software development life cycle, that, when you write tests, it actually allows you to get more done, quicker and more reliably. So it actually reduces the overall quality, or rather, expense and effort of the project in the long term. But it's very hard to, really convince that because it's rather intangible at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. But tests do give you confidence, right? Ultimately, you need the software to work. And the only way you can kind of check it if it's working or not is by running it through a bunch of tests. Now, are the tests hard to write? Yes. And that's a second problem that I think we should talk about is, the testing pyramid, right? So Google came out with a book, Testing Software, and on the cover they put, the triangle, the testing pyramid. And at the base of a triangle, you have your unit tests. You write a lot of unit tests. They test each part of code in isolation. And then you write a few, pure tests, and that's your integration tests. And finally, at the top of a pyramid, like a very small percentage, are end-to-end tests. And everyone is like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to write unit tests. But imagine yourself from a client's perspective. To the user of your website or your web app, the end-to-end test is what matters, right? That's what we see. That's what we experience, right? If I cannot add an item to to my cart and check out, that's my end-to-end experience that's not working. I don't care if you, have 100% code coverage on every aspect of your code. If it doesn't work together when it's deployed, then I don't care. I think, the software is broken. We just have this perspective of testing pyramid because it's determined by the tools we have and not by how relevant it is to the actual human user that's outside of our system.
I don't know. All of my users, they go in and they use my string down caser, and then they use my other little piece. And no, they don't. You're right. One other thing, just, because you're making the case for end-to-end tests, and I completely agree with you, especially when it comes down to, different levels of integration. If you have things that have to run the whole stack and back and forth and microservices and all the other things that we do nowadays, it can get, it can get complicated. And if it's complicated to test, it's also complicated to get right. So one of the things that I see with end-to-end tests is, just having that. I mean, especially with like mission critical systems like payment and stuff like that. Those are the areas where I start first, right? It's what are they paying for and how are they paying for it? And if those things don't work, then it doesn't matter how good your unit tests are.
Exactly. We write a lot of unit tests not because they are really determining the quality of software, but because they're so easy to write. We have a choice of excellent testing frameworks for JavaScript, right? It's kind of like golden age. You have your old standby like Tape, you have Mocha, you have new ones like AiA and Jest, who are excellent frameworks. They do so many interesting things right now. Like, Jest with snapshot testing is just incredibly useful. It completely removes so much code from my spec files because I can just take the whole result and without even computing it by hand, just have a test.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say for unit tests is that when we write software and we make decisions at that level, it is easy to encode all of our assumptions into those unit tests. So, we're not saying that unit tests aren't valuable. What we're saying is that a lot of times we don't see the value that we could get from end-to-end tests. And the other thing is that sometimes they're hard enough to write to where the trade-off, we don't see the trade-off as being worth it, even though we do see that there could be massive value in them if we could get them to work on those critical parts.
Right. It's always a question of trade-offs, right? If you see the value, but it's hard to actually achieve it, well, you kind of let it slide. And that's what actually attracted me to Cypress in the first place. So I heard about them almost a year and a half ago. And as soon as I, got beta access and I could download and actually use it, I just fell in love. I wrote a blog post, a long time ago, and I called it, I think, Finding Testing Nirvana with Cypress. Like, have you ever heard Nirvana and testing in the same sentence, right? Like, that's almost impossible to find.
Unless there's not Nirvana.
Exactly.
Isn't Nirvana like impossible to achieve? So maybe it is appropriate.
To me, it's a state of mind, Chuck.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. So it's hard to achieve, but that tool I thought gives the closest to Nirvana experience. And just to kind of the things that attracted me to the tool was that it was so easy to install. It has a great feature set. And finally, it actually made testing so easy and useful that I could actually keep running the test and get value out of them. Like I could see them fail as I rewrite the code or update the code. Because I could see them, for example, failing in CI was actually very useful because it generates screenshots and detailed log messages. And it actually tells me where the test fails and why. And it was so easy to actually look at the assertion, and instead of seeing a ginormous stack trace with mostly promise callbacks, I could actually see what failed and why. And I could I forgot to initialize this data or something, right? Or this call to the server backend failed. It's incredibly interesting experience. And Cypress did put a lot of effort into, for example, useful assertion messages, right? Literally, the messages when something goes wrong are incredible. And because ultimately you write all the tests and they only give you value when they fail, right? Not when they pass. When they pass, well, they're always passing or should be passing. Only when they fail, that's when you actually find how good a testing framework or tool is. Does it give you all the info to immediately pinpoint the problem?
So how do you set up those messages in your tests then? Because I agree with you. I mean, that's one of the things that I've run into, as I've gotten better at testing is making it tell me exactly what the problem is and setting up my error messages in my code so that it gives me good feedback. Because, I mean, I see good tools that give you good information. They give you a good stack trace and things like that. But having good error messages that I encode into my app is just as important. So how do you strike that balance, and what is it about this tool that makes that part of it easier?
Just to step back. Imagine you have your test framework, right? And if something fails, usually you have an expectation, like you expect some particular value to be equal to some value that you computed by hand. What's good,
Mhm.
but you know it's good.
Yeah.
And when Mocha fails, for example, it will just say expect like false to be equal true or something. And you have no idea. You
That's
usually
really
just
helpful.
see the test name, right? It's like, well, I have a test name. I have no idea what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And libraries like, Jasmine matchers and Jasmine and additional third-party libraries, they actually wrap around assertion statement. And for example, instead of just saying expected value to equal something else, they actually tell you the code line that failed, the nice value printout. Sometimes you can pass extra text messages that you want, but you have to write them. So AiA, for example, gives you the values of all the variables inside the test at that moment when it fails, so you can actually see more information. But for example, you have no idea if in a long test, if the previous assertions passed and which values, right? So in Cypress, because we're testing a visual stuff, right? We're testing a web page.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually see the log of all messages, of all assertions, of all steps a test is taking up to the crash. So you can actually see, oh, I logged in, went through, I clicked on a button, I entered some text, I pushed this button, everything was fine. And then, for example, I made an assertion, I expected to find some text on a page, like let's say my login name, and I never found it.
Mm-hmm.
So I see the entire test run step by step. The assertion message could usually print something like, I expected to find this text in this particular area of my page, and I could not find it. So you kind of see what it was trying to do. And then you have a screenshot of the entire thing, so you can see how the page looked at the moment when it crashed. And just to go back, let's say Selenium, right? Or any of headless browsers. When they run, you actually don't see much, right? Usually, if it's controlling a browser, it's kind of the side of a page or flashing too quickly for you to actually see what's going on. Cypress is an Electron-based app, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it actually pops a GUI with Electron browser by default. And when it runs the test, like you should actually see the video on Cypress.io website. It actually shows you step by step, and you can see the page being interacted with by the test runner. So you can keep it open and see what's going on. And if a test fails, then you can actually go back and click on every step inside the failing test and see not just a snapshot of a DOM at that particular step, but a snapshot of a DOM before and after each step, before and after a button click, before and after you typed in some text into an input box. So you can see each step and what each step achieved. And you can even see like some hints we actually show with like red rectangles, like which button we actually clicked when we clicked on a button. So you can see if it goes somewhere, in the wrong place, for example. Trying to be as useful and as helpful to a developer when something goes wrong.
Now, that's interesting to me just because usually when I was doing end-to-end tests, what I would run into is basically, and we can dig into this in a minute as far as writing assertions, but yeah, it was, okay, how do I tell it what to expect? And then, I like to run my tests headlessly, especially on CI, and so I have no way of knowing what it's doing.
Right. So on again, we run on CI as the Electron browser. We can record everything there. We take the screenshots. For us, the Electron runs in CI like without any problems. As long as you have virtual server, XVFB, then it works. We have tests and examples in every possible CI. We have Docker containers that we prepare with all requirements. We even have a Docker images with Cypress pre-installed. So if you have a repo, you can just use that container and start testing right away. It's a sweet system. We never have problems. Again, when it fails, it actually takes the snapshots and gives you detailed information. And just on the other side, not only you can take screenshots, you can record the video of a browser while it's running, and you can either store it locally as a movie, or you can upload it to our Cypress dashboard, which is our SaaS paid product. So just a little plug. If you don't want to manage all the artifacts and screenshots and test histories, you can just pay for a dashboard, and all the things will be uploaded there. And you have central location with all your passing and failing test data.
So the Electron app is free then?
But yes. So just to kind of describe our plans. So we wrote this Cypress testing tool, and it's great. We convinced some companies to pay for beta access, and I was at a company before where we actually paid to have beta access, and we were very happy. And later we kind of heard the same kind of objection to trying Cypress and using Cypress. And the objection was, if I invest time and I write my end-to-end tests using Cypress API and using Cypress test runner, what happens when Cypress folds or decides to raise prices tenfold? All that effort kind of goes to waste, right?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody wanted to invest in a small company's proprietary testing product. So after long soul searching, we have decided that yes, we kind of got a good thing. We knocked that testing thing out of a ballpark, but we have to open source it. Otherwise, it will not gain market share at all. It's just and you would not invest too, right? Your time into writing something for closed source to run. So we decided to open source the entire desktop application thing. You can run it yourself. You can run it on CI. It's Electron-based app. It has all the features. There are no limitations. And that thing will be open source really, really soon. We are preparing a major release 1.00, where all the limitations of beta access will be removed. All the source code has been pulled into a single repository. It's very, very well tested. It's building. It's a nice tool to have. And now you can write Cypress test and, kind of sleep, assured that your investment in writing test will not disappear. And Cypress as a company has a paid product, which is our SaaS dashboard, where, just running your tests, 100 times in CI is nice. But what happens when there's a failure? You want to record a video. Now you can record the video and probably store it as artifact on your, CI server, but you can send it to our dashboard, and then comparing the successful run to a failing run would be trivial. And Cypress actually generates a lot of data. Every time you click on a button, it generates events that describe what happens. So what we can do in a SaaS product is be very efficient about how you investigate a failure, right? You can kind of compare the failing and passing test run and quickly find, this is what changed. This is the different event. Let's say my backend did not respond in a way, I hope it would respond. And that's what led to UI failure later. So we have some sweet, features in a SaaS that are not part of the app, not because the app is limited in any way. No, it's just the app by itself, by working with single test run, cannot do these things.
Right.
Think visual, diffing of screenshots. You cannot do it in a test runner. You have to have previous, screenshots if you want to do visual difference, right? So that's what we hope to make money on, the SaaS product. But the tool itself, completely open source, and we welcome contributions from community. For example, we have limited ourselves to Mac and Linux platforms, and people are asking for Windows version, and it's an Electron-based app, right? It should be easy, but we just didn't have time to implement the Windows support yet.
Right.
So
nice. Well, I think that's a pretty decent walkthrough of what you get with Cypress. I have some other questions about just end-to-end testing in general, though, that I would like to dig into. But first, why don't you tell people where to go get the open source version and the SaaS version, just so that, if they're like, oh, I'm so interested in this, they can go check it out while they're thinking about it. Okay, so for everything Cypress related, cypress.io, like a tree, cypress.io. There are links to beta access programs, so you get notified when the open source launches. Follow us on Twitter at cypress.io. We have a Gitter channel where we constantly ask questions at Cypress/Cypress. And we do have a GitHub repository where right now all we do is answer people's issues, right? Which we kind of use to keep track of feature requests and bugs. That GitHub repository, cypress.io/Cypress, will become the open source once we move all the code there. Okay.
So I guess people have started that repository with more than 1,000 GitHub starts, and I can only imagine how popular it will become once it actually has code and not just problems.
This episode is sponsored by Hired.com. Are you searching for a new job? That can be stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through the interview process just to find out at the very end that the salary, offer, or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Hired is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities in engineering, development, design, product management, data science, sales, and marketing. We make your job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of when and how you connect with compelling new opportunities. After completing one simple application, top employers apply to hire you. And on Hired, you receive personal interview requests and upfront salary information so you can make informed decisions about what opportunities to pursue over a condensed timeline. Hired offers access to more than 4,000 innovative employers, including big brand names like Facebook and smaller emerging startups. The size and type of company you want to connect with is totally up to you. And we help you find new opportunities in 17 major cities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Open to relocation? Let them know. Your privacy and autonomy in your job search is of utmost importance. And if you go check them out at the show's link, that's hired.com/adventures in Angular, you can get double their normal hiring bonus. So instead of $300, you get $600 for signing up at our link. That's hired.com/adventures in Angular. So back onto end-to-end testing here for a minute. One other thing that I ran into when I was writing end-to-end tests is what level of specificity to get to. So, for example, if I have a UI and it puts like the username or some other information on the page, right? When I first started writing end-to-end tests, I'd say, okay, well, there should be this DOM element inside this DOM element inside this other DOM element that has this text in it. And I found out pretty fast that if I ever moved it, it would break my test, even though it was fine. And so, at what level do you specify this kind of stuff? I mean, do you just check if the username's somewhere on the screen? Do you check if it's visible? I mean,
that's a constant problem with end-to-end testing.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely understand the problem. The way we implemented this is that you don't have to specify the long kind of selector path, right? Think of your header, and then inside there should be navigation, and then inside should be username, right?
Right.
Cypress has this interesting API that's fluent, so that means you can chain calls and keep chaining jQuery. And you can, for example, select a header and then say, .find, and then select navigation, and then that will return you a navigation inside the header. And then you can chain there and, for example, find username. And you can find username by both a CSS selector or by text. So which is really nice usually. Mm-hmm. So that means first that you can easily see where the selector goes wrong, because if you have it in 3 different steps, if one of the things changed, then that particular step will fail. You see,
Uh-huh.
for example, if you moved your username from navigation somewhere else, well, the first call to get the header will succeed. The second call to get the navigation will succeed. And then it will try to find username and it will fail, and it will show that particular step failed in a screenshot. And you're like, oh, yeah, well, it's the wrong element. Now it's, for example, in a body of a website, not in a navigation header. So that's nice. But also, I want to point out one thing is that, first of all, we have aliases. So you can, for example, define an alias to a navigation element. That means you can set up a call and say, get header, get navigation, and remember as, and then an alias name. An alias name is something, could be any string. And then later inside your test, you can say, get me that navigation element and find username. And so you can reuse the same kind of selector, but it's all like a chained API in other tests so easily that you can only set it up once and you never have to repeat yourself. So if you move your, for example, navigation somewhere, you can just update a single alias command and all your tests will stay the same and you don't have to remember it. Okay, so we kind of solve, I think, this problem by being very flexible in how you write your selectors through API and not by hard coding these long selector strings.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
I just want to point out one thing where I think a tool independent of any particular UI framework is actually very useful. So think about, a tool like even Protractor, right? It's really Angular specific. Something else could be really specific to React, right? Or some other tool or some other framework. And let's say you're doing a rewrite of your website, right? Or you plan to do that. It's hard to actually work with two frameworks on a page if you have to use two end-to-end testing solutions, right? So by actually working with just the DOM and, server requests, Cypress allows you to set up tests and then do major rewrites, switching frameworks, updating libraries, whatever you want. And the tests are still running because it's not related to any particular framework. We have examples for all major frameworks. We just work with DOM events and DOM modules. We work directly with server requests by intercepting them. And I guess that's it. And we work with the browser APIs. So you're not depending on a particular framework. So that actually allows you to experiment a lot and rewrite a lot of things without updating a lot of tests right away.
So one other question that I have, and this is something that I've also run into with some of these tools like Selenium WebDriver and Phantom.js in particular, is the DOM engine, right? So I'm assuming it's running on, you said Electron, so I'm assuming it's running with WebKit, Chromium.
Yes.
But Phantom.js has, at least in my experience, used older versions of WebKit. And, it doesn't update as often as I would like, and so it doesn't always have some of the features that I assume the browser's going to have. Do you just rely on Electron to keep you up to date with your engine? Or
we do rely on that. We do rely on that for built-in browser.
Okay.
But we can also load and control through Chrome extension API any Chromium-based browser. So straight out of the box, you can run on Chromium, Chrome Canary, and it just works. We are actually looking at supporting other browsers because now the extension API has been kind of standardized, so we can actually control other browsers almost as well as we can control Chrome. So in a future version, we'll definitely support other browsers. So you're not limited to just particular thing. One thought I have to add to why we're different from Selenium, right? And you kind of said it's almost like riding an elephant on top of a horse or something. So Selenium is almost like a black box, and you control it by kind of throwing messages there and say, hey, type this. Well, you don't know when the typing actually happens. You don't know what the DOM looks like, right? You have to ask it. It's a very stateless system. It's kind of like black box. You hope that something updates there, but you don't really know. And this leads to a huge problem, which is timeouts, right? Let's say you push a button. Well, when, has your framework actually updated the button and updated the screen? You don't know. You cannot set up a webhooks or mutation observers if you actually use Selenium or WebDriver. So by loading Electron browser, by loading the test runner right inside the browser, we have full control and full access to the DOM API, right? That means that, for example, when you push a button and when you make assertion that the new user login name is displayed, Cypress will actually watch the DOM, and as soon as it notices the DOM mutation, it will compare the text. And if the text is what it expects to find, it will continue the test. So if you look at videos of Cypress, they're too fast. It's not because we sped them up. That's how they actually run in Cypress. They run extremely fast because we have direct access to the DOM. We don't have to wait longer than necessary. And this also has a very nice side effect, is that when you run tests, you almost never have to do, Cypress wait, 5 seconds for something to update, because Cypress has full access to everything. It just knows as soon as it finishes, something happens, it can continue. By default, we allow, for example, assertions to wait up to 4 seconds for something to change. And if expected value is not there, then assertion fails, but you can set a longer limit. We can also spy and stop mock, server requests, so we can actually know when, for example, API returns something, so we can immediately continue. We know when the page loads, and you can immediately continue. There are almost no need to add any delays, unlike the Selenium, which is like a black box. So you have to kind of wait and hope that it's finished.
So one other question that I have is, do you set up the test cluster, what it's going to hit?
So for test cluster, your CI runs either Cypress, which uses the built-in Electron browser, or you can specify with a browser that you want to control, and that browser should be installed. We are looking at, source labs and browser stack, and we could potentially integrate with them. Right now, to be honest, I think the majority of evergreen browsers do this, a good job of actually doing the same thing when you ask them to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, gone are the days when, your normal kind of website looks completely broken in one browser, but completely works, works very well in a normal browser. We're not comparing, Firefox to IE 6. So what I would suggest is that writing almost all your end-to-end tests, and assume you have Electron browser. And only if something is found to be broken in a particular other browser, then you probably should write a Selenium test for that particular thing, and then you run on a browser cluster like Source Labs. We found that majority of cases you're good if the newer modern browser works well. And in that case, you really need one browser to test. I think the trade-off at this point of testing across all the browsers, you have to justify it, the complexity, just so you can say we test on all browsers.
Yeah, I was actually aiming more for the server setup. So I have to have my app running somewhere.
Yes. Sorry if I misunderstood. Yeah, you do have your actual web app deployed somewhere.
Okay.
And you can control this easily through environment variables if you want to change and, for example, test something else. At Cypress blog, we have examples how we actually test, a hypothetical website and across different environments. For example, we run Cypress locally as we are, developing it. It reruns the tests. We update the test, it's passing locally, then we run it on CI by starting the server in the background, running the tests against the server. Then, for example, we deploy the website somewhere into staging environment, and then we rerun the same tests again, but we point at that particular staging URL. And the purpose of that is that there are so many moving parts, you want to move just one of them, right? So once you deploy, you want to rerun the same test to make sure that you deployed correctly, but all your database connections went through, all your environment variables are set. So when you deploy to staging, you run the same end-to-end tests against that. Then you deploy to production, and you run either all end-to-end tests or a subset against that particular URL. So by making end-to-end test run as easy as a single CLI command, it makes it so much easier to actually test your app in all environments and make sure that all of them work or easily see where the problem happened. I see Lucas has an interesting question.
Lucas.
So, I pretty much just want you to take my money right now.
I cannot take your money. It's free. I cannot.
So if you're comfortable, how much does this cost if I wanted to take my super hot tech startup and we're going to IPO in 8 weeks, and I need to pay you to make sure that my code is working and stable? Do you have pricing plans? I didn't find anything on the site, but this is pretty compelling technology.
The tool itself, is free, so you can install it and run yourself. You don't have to pay us anything. We did invest a lot in writing the documentation. So if you look at the docs.cypress.io, the documentation is just exceptional. We literally, for a 5-person startup to spend 40% of development time over the last 2 months, just writing and updating the docs is just incredible investment of time. You don't have to pay us to read the docs. You don't have to pay us to communicate with us through GitHub or Gitter channel. If you decide that you want, for example, to store all your tasks and have extra features for your CI environment, like task history and some other interesting features, then we can talk about paying for the Cypress dashboard. And that depends on the number of private repos and the number of total tests, but I expect it to be a couple $100, for a normal size company. And if you want to pay us for private support and, kind of helping you write very effective end-to-end tests, then we can talk offline. And I'm sure it's not going to break your budget. How much a bad quality will cost you? That's the question you should ask yourself.
Ooh, I see what you did there. How much is avoiding a catastrophic failure worth to your company?
Exactly.
10,
it's not the cost, it's the value.
$15.
Yeah, that's so I will say this. This is completely, I'm not being paid to say this by any means. Actually, Cypress has kind of been on my radar for a couple of weeks. Somebody had shown it to me, and super pleasantly surprised that Gleb is involved. I have a lot of respect for him. So kind of while we're setting up on the pre-call, I installed Cypress and went through kind of their getting started guide, and it is really, really insanely easy and super pleasant. And so kind of for these magical, I can't actually believe this is working, especially, in light of, how hard I've had to work to get even Protractor up and running, or even, Karma or different things. So, I definitely recommend, for everybody listening to this, go and take 5 minutes and install Cypress and write your first unit test. And then more importantly, write your first end-to-end test. And after about 5 minutes, you're going to be like, holy cow, it feels like a trap. It was too easy. So
thank you.
That was super awesome.
Thank you. And I just want to plug in, for everyone's sake, Angular Dev Summit next week. I'll be showing, Cypress in action. I'll be showing how to test an app, whatever common pitfalls, how to stop a server, and do all these interesting things using the latest unreleased yet version of Cypress. So, join in, watch me, pay for the ticket so you can rewatch it later. Everyone should watch Angular Dev Summit next week.
Tickets are free. And when
tickets
this comes
are very
out,
expensive, free.
Well,
I'll buy 3.
Yeah. And when this comes out, Gleb's talk is Friday morning. So,
yes.
So it's this Friday. It's not next week. It's this week as this is released. So, we're recording this a week before the conference, but yeah, definitely check that out. because it's going to be terrific. And I really tried to get more hands-on demo style talks. So, some of them are going to be conceptual, but I think most of them are going to be sort of the, here's how you do a thing. And so if that's kind of the thing that you're looking for out there, then definitely check it out.
Yes, I'll do my best to do, live demonstration. I probably will record videos just in case, because you never know. But it's going to be just showing end-to-end testing. That's it.
Awesome. Anything else that we should have dived into here, guys, as far as, end-to-end testing goes?
I think you really would just have to see it to believe it, to be honest.
Yep.
So go try it.
Yes, please go try it. It's a nice tool. I loved it, and that's why after being a happy user for a year, I joined the team. It's that good.
Awesome. Well, the last question I typically ask before we do picks is if people want to follow what you're working on now, Gleb, or just follow you on Twitter or GitHub or whatever. Where do they go? Maybe you have a blog or something too.
I do have a blog, so you can find me, just by typing my last name, Bahmutov, which is kind of hard to type. BAHMUTOV as in victory. The easiest way is to follow Lucas on Twitter and find who he follows and find me there.
Nice.
Follow one person.
Nice.
So I do have a personal website, glebbahmutov.com. Links to my GitHub projects are there. There's a link to blog. I do blog a lot. There are a lot of stuff, including a lot of stuff on testing. And sometimes I'm active on Twitter. So if you go to Twitter and search for Gleb Bahmutov, you'll find me under my last name. I'm really happy that my parents, as soon as I was born in the Soviet Union, picked a good Twitter handle for me, and I got it. Just my last name.
I wonder if Rubalkey's available. I'll be back. Hold the fort down.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks.
Are you ready to master Angular? Oasis Digital offers Angular Bootcamp, a 3-day intense workshop class for individuals or teams. They cover Angular 4 and 2 and focus on the skills and knowledge you need for complex, data-rich applications. They also still offer Angular.js for teams supporting older projects. Bring them to your site or send developers to them in St. Louis, San Francisco, New York, DC, and other cities, and online at angularbootcamp.com.
Joe, do you have
ready.
some picks for us?
Yep. So I'm got a couple of picks today. The first one is going to be the new Brandon Sanderson novel, Oathbringer, is coming out in just a couple of months. I've been rereading the other books in it's the Stormlight Archive, and I'm halfway through the second book, and boy, they're just such fantastic books. So if you haven't read those yet, I highly recommend them. I really enjoy them.
Read everything from Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
Insanely. He's just one of my favorites.
Absolutely.
Even the graphic novels are terrific.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And my other pick is I've got a new course. It's should be roughly out about the time this releases, maybe a couple weeks after, and that's on pluralsight.com. It's migrating from Angularjs to Angular, which for those who aren't in the know, that's Angular 1 to Angular 2, which is now on 5. So got a whole course in which there's a major section just devoted to what to call Angular in there.
Nice.
Yep, there you go. So those are my picks.
Yeah, and just to plug that a little bit, if you want an easy link, go to devchat.tv/pluralsight, and we get credit for that. So if you sign up.
Nice.
Ooh, yeah.
All right, Lucas, what are your picks?
All right, I'm back. All right, so I would also like to just plug a book that I read recently called Perennial Seller, The Art of Making and Marketing Work That Lasts by Ryan Holiday. I'm a huge fan of Ryan. His Ego is the Enemy and Obstacle is the Way books are pretty phenomenal. So I guess those would be like my sub picks. But he's really kind of turned me on to the concept of stoicism, and just a really fascinating, author. And I think he just killed it on this book, Perennial Seller, and just highly recommend it. It's just a really well thought out kind of playbook on how to create things that are going to stand the test of time.
Awesome. Yeah, EO is the Enemy was terrific. I haven't read the other one. I'm going to jump in here with a few picks. So I've been kind of taking control of my infrastructure, and mainly it's just either I don't want to pay for these services because they get expensive. For example, Slack is like $6 per month per user or something like that. If you want the backlog, which I do, and all of that stuff. It turns out there's an open source version of Slack. It's not made by Slack. It's called Mattermost. It has most of the features that Slack has. It's super easy to set up. It was funny because I was like, you know what? I need a break. I'm going to spend a couple hours setting up Mattermost. And like 10 minutes later, I was like, ooh, this is really nice. So I'm really, really liking that. I'm also going to be using it for the chat for the conference. And so I can host it all. And I had people that, they would get into the Slack room late when I was using Slack because I was using the free version and, no backlog. And so they're like, where do I get the information that you put in here before? And so I'd have to post it again. Or if I didn't log in for a couple of days, then they were out of luck. So anyway, this is super nice. And it also allows me to move the infrastructure I have for devchat.tv. I have 5 or 6 people who help me with the podcast as far as production goes. I had to set them up as channel-only people, so I didn't have to pay for their access. And I have a couple other people that do more than that for me, so I have to pay for them to be in, and it just turned into kind of a big mess. And, trying to save costs there. And it's nice just to be able to pull people in and say, hey, this is the dev chat place. So anyway, I'm moving stuff over there. Probably going to do it with the Adventures in Angular Slack and other things. So if you go to adventuresinangular.com/Slack, it'll still take you to the Slack room now, but I am going to be changing that. And then, yeah, I'm really, really liking it. They were also picked up by, I think they were bought out by GitLab, and GitLab's another thing that I just set up, and they were super easy to set up too. So if you want your own, basically GitHub that you host yourself, I pay GitHub between the devchat.tv organization and my own private repos. It's not a ton of money, but it's less money for me to just have my own GitLab set up, and then I can also do whatever I want there and keep it private or public or what have you. And so I'm really, really enjoying having both of those things kind of in my back pocket. So I'm going to pick both of those. And then just another reminder, Angular Dev Summit, you've already missed a day or so. Don't miss any more. It's free. I mean, it's free and it's online, so you don't have to travel. Just sign up and then come join us. Gleb, what are your picks?
I have only 2 picks. The first one is Ken C. Dodds has done an excellent job, talking about and teaching JavaScript testing course on front-end masters. And he uses Jest for unit tests, and then he uses Cypress for end-to-end testing. And he does an exceptional job explaining both tools in great detail and showing how they can be used effectively. So Ken C. Dodds front-end masters JavaScript testing is excellent. And my second pick is a competitor to Cypress called Test Cafe. So in open source, we are not really competing if we're open sourcing our tools as much as we are growing the ecosystem. But Test Cafe is an interesting idea. They have implemented end-to-end testing using a similar API to Cypress. And they also reached a conclusion that closed source testing tool will not work. So they open sourcing it recently. And it's a great tool. You should check it out. See if you like it even better than Cypress and use it. They picked a strategy of creating a paid version that they will release with extra features. So you can use open source end-to-end testing tool or future paid version with extra features. So we'll see how that works out for them. So check out Test Cafe. Excellent project.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming, Gleb, and for helping us figure some of this stuff out, because I can tell you, I, for one, have found end-to-end testing to be a pain in the past, and this sounds really, really nice.
Well, thanks for having me, and happy testing.
Yep.
See ya.
Bye.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.